I guess for me, the buzziest moment along the lines, I'd been at Serato a week, literally a week, and Mix Master Mike from the Beastie Boys was down. So I got to meet him, and the crazy thing, I've met famous people before, but they treat you like a fan. But the crazy thing here is, because I was with Serato, he was actually listening to the words I said and interested in what I was going to say, but I was new and had no idea what I was saying. And that just kind of blew my mind.
Kia ora, welcome everyone. Today we are having a candid chat with Young Lee, CEO at Serato. Young, if you don't mind giving us a bit of an introduction as to who you are and what you do at the moment.
Hi and welcome. Hey all, my name's Young. I run Serato. We're a music tech company based right here in New Zealand.
Awesome. And then for people that might not be familiar with what Serato actually does, in basic terms, what is Serato?
So we boast we're the most used DJ software in the world. So we have 2 million people per year who use our software. That's 500,000 monthly active users. We also make music production and we're industry standard in movie audio plugins.
Nice work. And then for, in terms of the scale of that business for people outside of the music industry, this is an incredible New Zealand success story that's used by some of the biggest DJs in the world. What are some of the names of the people that are using Serato's DJ software?
Yeah, so DJ, it's people like Fatboy Slim, it's people like Snoop Dogg, it's people like Questlove. Actually, these days, some of the biggest names are through music production. It's the legends like Timbaland, DJ Dahi, who does Kendrick Lamar songs, it's Flying Lotus. It's definitely the A-listers of the world.
Nice. And then I think you once upon a time said that there's almost not a country in the world that someone's not using Serato. Is that the case?
Yeah. So we've got Google Analytics in Serato. And if you look back a year or two, literally there is not a country in the world that has internet that doesn't have a Serato hit. So the countries that don't, we don't have a hit in North Korea. We don't have a hit in Western Sahara, but even Scott's Base, every other countries after Google have Serato hits.
Outstanding. Cool. So what we'd love to do is maybe unpick your career journey a little bit, Young, sort of leading up to Serato. And if you don't mind, I'd love to hear, what were you like as a teenager? Were you someone that were, thinking about getting into tech, or what were you doing as a teenager?
Yeah, I never really thought about my career as a teenager. It was a simple case of I love playing computer games. And I just kind of followed my nose around. I didn't really, I always knew I'd grow up and have a job. I must say I never really thought about a career in the sense of where would I start and where would I end up. That's something that just kind of happened along the way.
Yeah, nice. And then the games that you were playing back then, what were the sort of games when you were a teenager, if you can remember them?
Yeah, so I remember one of my first games was actually King's Quest. So back then, computers really were business machines. So we had a monochrome screen and you had to learn how to use a computer to get the games working. So literally in this quest to get games to go, I learned a lot about computers and how they function and how to set up memory. And it kind of moved from there. It went from 2 colors to 4 colors to 16, on to some of the greats like Doom was the first real first-person shooter out there, onto the greats like Half-Life was the first kind of first-person shooter with a story, and that's what spawned Steam. It was definitely a journey of computer games, right from computers right to what we have now.
Awesome. And then in terms of your friend group, so there was a cohort of you that were all sort of playing the same games and loving it, or?
So back then people didn't really play computer games, so it wasn't a cohort of people who played computer games. It was a cohort of people who liked computers, and it was almost this. It was a subgroup of computer people who were very different from the mainstream people at school back then. It's just in the last 10 years or so, 20 years, computers have slammed into everyone's lives. But when I was a kid, it was quite rare for people to have that much exposure to computers. Yeah, I think it's growing to be part of everything now.
Awesome. And then what did your parents think? Like, were they supportive of you, constantly playing computer games, or were they,
Yeah.
unaware? What was their
No, they were super happy with it. They were, my mum, it was actually my mum early on bought us a computer that actually plugged into the TV. Going back a lot, we were super, super poor when I was quite young. And so they were very busy working, and the whole computer thing was they saw it as quite a good new way of learning, and quite a good way for us to kind of find our path. They were quite supportive of it.
Cool. And then, so fast forward to sort of coming towards the end of high school years, what were you thinking about at that point? Were you thinking that you were going to go and do something around computers, or?
No, I mean, not really. High school, I was too busy being a teenager. So I was playing games, reading comics, hanging out with friends. I still wasn't really thinking about career or jobs or stuff. I was just kind of following my nose. So it worked out well in the end.
Yeah. And then, so you eventually went to university. What did you end up doing?
Yeah, so uni was easy in the sense that, the uni pick was easy. So my parents did the old, I should do a BCom. And I remember there was a distinct decision when I went to uni to enroll, and I kind of thought, wow, BCom, I don't really like accounting, which is quite ironic because a lot of what I do now is accounting. But I kind of thought, the thought pattern kind of basically went, well, I like playing games, I'll do computer science. Best decision that I've ever made that didn't have a lot of thought in it. And so a bit of luck in there, but it was a great choice.
Yeah. So your parents sort of perhaps thought that you might be enrolling in an accounting degree, and you came home enrolled in computer science, and they were supportive of it?
Yeah, it wasn't what they said I should do, but it's still it was still a degree that a traditional Chinese parent would still be fine with. So they were fine with it.
Yeah. And then, so what was computer science like back in those days at Auckland University, like however long ago that was?
It was, it was very, it's very education focused. I think they're a lot better now of promoting entrepreneurship and promoting kind of social cohesion. I think back then, this is 30 years ago. It was definitely probably more like you would imagine a maths lecture. But I think over time it's become a lot more rounded.
Yeah. And then in terms of the group of people that you were studying with, did you make like good friends and good connections with people that were sort of similarly minded?
Yeah. Well, there was, strangely enough, or maybe not strangely enough, but I remember distinctly, I didn't actually hang out with them, but I met and they stuck in my mind. The two founders of Serato actually were in my computer science class back at university. And I remember going back to talking about Doom and Wolfenstein before. I remember Steve, I was a lab demonstrator at the time, and I came in and I saw Steve. He'd written a Wolfenstein clone that dynamically picked up images from your screen at the time. Back in the day, that was legendary. And I just distinctly walked over, saw a screen, and thought, I can't help you. I'm out. Wandered off. And so I think that, it was, computer science was still quite a rare subject back then. And so some of the people who were from that age have gone on to do great things.
Yeah, interesting. So you didn't have much to do with them, but you were aware of what Steve was up to.
Yeah, and AJ and a lot of my other friends have gone out into the industry now. Yeah, it was a small group. Like back then, computers were just emerging as a thing in the industry. It's not like now where it permeates through everything we do. And so most people had gone through uni at those days, have moved on to take positions in different forms of today's industry.
Yeah. And then, so you're getting towards the end of the degree. I take it you still, albeit sounds like a lot of theory, still were enjoying it. Were you thinking that was going to lead on to a job like in some sort of computer related industry, or what were you thinking at that point?
Like I said, I think I was just following my nose. I figured I'd finish the degree, get a job. I didn't really know what a job meant, and I didn't really know what a career meant. And I think actually that's that's some of the issues facing kids these days, is that when you need to tell people and make a decision of what job you're aiming for, you don't actually know what the job means or what it entails. And I guess I thought it'd get me a job. What kind of job it meant, I had no idea.
Interesting. So did you end up applying for any jobs, or did you just decide, you know?
Yeah, well, actually, a couple of friends and one of the friends had an idea. We decided to shack up and start a computer games company at the time. And so it was, for me, it was as simple as I was young. I had really not that much to lose. I was still living with my parents at the time. And so I didn't have rent or anything. I didn't have a family to look after. So if someone had an idea to shack up in a garage and build a prototype for a game, why not?
Yeah. So how did that come about? So you're just kind of like, what was the nuts of that conversation? It was basically just
well, we're literally just talking. One of the guys had already been at work, so he knew more than two grads about how to do business at the time.
Yeah.
And so he had an idea, could work out how to do funding. We kind of went, well, great, let's do this. It was called RoboForge, actually. It was a game where you put together pieces of robots like Lego, and then you taught it how to fight and sent it off, and we would make these 3D movies for people. I think the actual building was brilliant, but the fighting ended up being too complicated for people.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great. But one of the advice you hear startup people say, and I think it's true, is if you're going to take a risk, take it when you're young, because you've got nothing to lose, essentially. And it's before you've got mouths to feed, and before you've lost before your opportunity cost includes a big salary, you should give it a go, because not succeeding at something is actually not that much of a big deal. And actually, in my case, the games company, although we didn't make it a financial success, actually taught me everything I needed to know to really excel at all my other jobs. It really gave me a boost up, I feel.
Interesting. So that was you and two others kind of holed up in someone's garage for how long until you decided it wasn't working anymore?
We got held for about 6 months. We built a prototype. We got venture capital, and we became a 10-person company, actually. And then we spent another year building the game. And then we launched, and of course, being young people, we only got enough venture capital for the first release, and we didn't think through marketing or sales or anything. So we launched the game and kind of went, oh, that didn't quite do what we needed, and we didn't know how to market or anything like that. So from there we moved on.
Yeah, amazing. Well, what a cool experience to go through. And as you said, you obviously learned a lot in that process. So coming to the end of that sort of journey or life cycle, were you thinking, maybe it's time to get a job, or what were you thinking next? Were you?
Yeah, so it was about that time, actually, I had my first child. So suddenly I was like, well, I should get a haircut and a real job. And it all just kind of came together. And so I actually went and worked at Datacom for a short period of time, but then the Air New Zealand opportunity came about. And Air New Zealand was really interesting in the sense that, as I think I said before, at that time, they realized the internet was very important for them, but no one had any experience. And I had probably more internet experience than other people. Oh, the game was an internet game, by the way. And I was happy to jump in because, I was young and I was keen and hadn't quite thought through the risks. So I jumped in and said, I'll do it. So Air New Zealand gave me a chance at quite a few quite massive projects, which pretty much taught me a lot about large project deliveries.
Amazing. So at that time, Air New Zealand did not have an online presence or online booking system, and that's what you were brought in to focus on, or what is
they did. It was at the very beginning. They had probably their first website, and they had a booking engine that was made overseas in England, but it didn't fit in the sense that they had to transform the airline to be able to do pricing online, and with the setup that they had, they could only do maybe one project a year. Whereas if it was important, they need to do 10 to 20 projects a year. And they essentially had to move from the internet being an information site to the internet becoming their main revenue channel. And so my time at Air New Zealand was this move between, it was this information site, they might have done 5 million through it. And when I left Air New Zealand 8-9 years later, it was their prime revenue channel, and they'd done $1 billion per annum through it. It was quite a change. And half of that change was the airline changing from a traditional business. So I don't know how much you know about airline rules, but the traditional rules, you can't give people prices up front. So they had to change their business to align with the internet, where people wanted prices up front. And so they changed the airline, they invested heavily in the online engine. And it was for someone who's in this game because they like to build stuff, it was a great time where the investment was there to really build things you were proud of.
Amazing. And that's incredible to hear, the vision and them seeing the opportunity that the internet was presenting to transform that business, and amazing to see the resources and teams that went into it. What did some of that look like for you in terms of, because that's quite a different experience from working on a game with some close friends to working in what was probably a big corporate environment at that point in time. What are the sort of things that you mainly learned, and some of the things that you really liked about that environment relative to what you were doing beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, it was a much, much bigger budget. And so you had a lot of the resources you need to do design and management and testing. So suddenly it wasn't everyone has to do everything. You could get expertise to do the parts that were important. I think there was a difference between, there was a scale that let you really get specialists in. But for me also, suddenly I moved, because their core business is an airline, whereas I'd gone from where the core business was engineering. So I got exposed to an entire world of the airline business where the people were different, the business was different, and I had to learn the business, which was great. And I got to bring and focus on what my differentiating skill was, which is software development. So I really got to hone my software development skills, but learn how to interact and learn other businesses. I think in New Zealand, one of the great things about working in the tech services business is you get to stick your nose into lots of different actual businesses and learn them. In smaller segments, in my career, I've managed to stick my nose into the alcohol business. I did some work for 42 Below, got to stick my nose into the television business, the airline business, and every industry is so different that you can work in an industry, apply your craft, which is technology, and learn other industries, which really rounds out your knowledge.
Yeah, that's amazing to, I suppose, get that exposure. And then of the people that you went through computer science or computer engineering with at university, and then you people that you built the game with, did any of those people come on that journey? Were they also in New Zealand, or what was it?
No, everyone went their separate ways. It's actually quite funny. Last week so one of the guys, Hugh, who was one of the other founders of RoboForge, we pretty much went our different ways. Last week at the High Tech Awards, I saw him. He founded a company called Motion. I don't know how to think, which is a movie studio data. Sorry, Hugh, I've probably got this wrong, but data redundancy service, I think. And after not seeing him for 10 years, he won a few awards there. And so it's funny how the industry is large, but actually really small. So you run into these people again as you grow and as the industry gets small. So yeah, I saw Hugh again at the High Tech Awards, and some of the other people I often see just around in other areas. As I get older, Auckland gets smaller, especially in tech.
Amazing. Now, judging by what you've said already, something tells me about the next step of your journey wasn't planned. So what was next after Air New Zealand?
Yeah, so I made a bit of a name for myself doing the Air New Zealand work, because Air New Zealand's a mammoth of technology services in New Zealand. So Serato was looking for a head of development, and so they shoulder tapped me in the sense that they needed someone to look after their team, and I'd made a name for myself. I'd never heard of Serato before I came in, and I came in, had a look around. Sounded exciting, sounded like a great product. I liked the people. And so it was an instant this is the change of scene that I wanted at the time. So I jumped across, and it was, I think, just, some of the themes of me following my nose to get where I am now. It was a smaller job than what I had at Air New Zealand. And so it was me deciding to jump to a different place, which had a different product. And I felt like I could make more great products as opposed to thinking about a career in terms of salary or how big your team is. And so it's worked out really well in the end. But sometimes I'd say people need to kind of follow their gut as opposed to think of it as career steps.
Yeah, interesting. And then you'd made the connection that was the same AJ and founders that you'd gone through university with.
Well, it was. I didn't. It was my second or third interview. I came in and they were there because at the time the CEO Sam was running it, and those two were silent at the time. So they were at the second interview, and when I walked in, we did the whole, hang on, I know you. Hello, long time no see.
Outstanding. And then for you, sort of in terms of your own interests, do you have any background in music or part-time DJing, or was it purely just as an engineering?
So one of the sayings we have now, which is Serato is a group of misfits. We have a whole bunch of outliers at work. We're people who have DJ backgrounds, music backgrounds, and computer science backgrounds. So mine, obviously, I like to make things. And so I've followed in that. Ironically enough, almost every meeting I go to at Serato, I'm the least musical person in the room, compared to actual musicians and DJs and producers. I come from the computer science realm. And so it's been great for me personally. It's really rounded out my experience into these other areas that I wouldn't have had exposure into.
Yeah.
But I've definitely come from the computer science side.
Cool. And then, so you went in there to sort of head up the development team. What did the business look like at that point, and what were you sort of mainly working on?
So back then, Serato was mainly known for they call it DVS, digital vinyl solution. So back then it was very high end. It was the A-listers only, and it was the vinyl solution. And most of our money back then came through what you'd call royalties. And we're just starting the journey into our other products. So back then it was high-end vinyl. From the time I've been there, we then went into controllers. So controllers are the one piece kind of with the two platters on them. They were basically seen as toys before Serato launched with Pioneer, Serato DJ with the SX, which really changed the industry, and controllers became then known as something professionals could use. So we went from that journey down to intro controllers for people who are just learning, and over from there into music production. And so probably tripled in size as well in terms of people and revenue. Since then. It's been a real growth.
That sort of journey through those stages must have been quite amazing, given the profile of some of the people that were starting to use the technology. Were there any specific points on that journey for you personally where all of a sudden it was like, oh, wow, we're starting to make quite a name for ourselves? Because I know that, Serato has been mentioned by Jay-Z and a whole bunch of really big musicians over the years. Were there any points for you that stuck out?
Yeah, there's one personally, Serato had already made a name for itself before I showed up. I'm not a founder, and the Jay-Z's and the Kanye's and the, even the Mariah Careys and the Eminems had Serato in their lyrics before I turned up. I guess for me, the buzziest moment along the lines, I've been at Serato a week, literally a week, and Mixmaster Mike from the Beastie Boys was down. So I got to meet him, and the crazy thing, I've met famous people before, but they treat you like a fan. But the crazy thing here is, because I was with Serato, he was actually listening to the words I said and interested in what I was going to say, but I was new and had no idea what I was saying. And that just kind of blew my mind, because he was such a legend to me as a teenager. I grew up listening to the Beastie Boys, and so there's these moments like these, I call them Serato moments actually, where I know it was only due to work that I had this moment that I never thought I'd have. It's either in a moment in a cultural environment that you never thought you'd be in, or you meet someone that you believe was a legend from your childhood that you never thought you'd meet.
Yeah.
That you, just because you happen to have ended up with this job that happened to be in New Zealand, that happens to be a worldwide success. It's amazing sometimes.
That's amazing. And I imagine there's tons of those across the board, given the caliber of people that you're working with.
Oh, it's all over the place. It just happens at random times.
Yeah, yeah. And then I suppose for you personally, like it's quite a different environment to working in a big corporate or a sort of in the airline industry. How has that changed you in terms of your personality or perspectives on your own work?
Yeah, well, it's it's opened me up a lot. It opens up your experience, and it opens up your experience and opens up your knowledge. I think I feel like a workplace that has a wider scope of experience can give you all these experiences. Sometimes it pushes your buttons, sometimes in great ways, sometimes in bad ways, but all of that actually expand your knowledge, and it builds you as a person. One of the sayings I do have is, Serato is not like anywhere else, and we're a lot of things, but we're not boring. And that's the truth of, that I used to think so back in New Zealand, I would work, however, it would still work for me. And so when things were tough, you just go, well, that's just work, and you shrug it off. Sometimes at Serato, you take things a lot more personally. And what I realized over time is it's because you care that much more. And so it does push your button, and sometimes it gives you those down days. But that actually, when you peel it back, actually means you care a lot about the success of this group.
Yeah.
And sometimes that part of it is what you need to then grow your skills or grow as a person. And so I've actually been quite appreciative of those experiences over time.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then you would have been exposed to a hell of a lot more music, and sort of getting out and seeing live music and experiencing some of the great musicians that you probably have come through your office as well. Yeah,
I've met a huge amount of musicians. I've been to a huge number of gigs that I never thought I'd go to. I've just been in a lot of situations that I just never would have thought. It's not even that I'm trying to do these things. I just never would have thought to try and do them.
Yeah.
I think I was saying the other day, I went to a punk gig, which is something I never thought I would go to. But, I enjoyed it so much. It was just so raw and had so much energy in it. And it's these kind of things, just even on a smaller level, that you kind of go, wow, I would have never been there if it hadn't been for the fact that I was talking to a Serato person who was then going to this thing. And so it's definitely somewhere that if you're open to it, you can open up your experiences to a whole lot of stuff.
Nice. So that's just sort of an office beer that someone tapped you on the shoulder and said, why don't you come along? Or how did that come about?
Yeah, well, it was a Friday afternoon of, what are you doing? I don't know, what are you doing? Well, let's go to a punk gig.
Awesome.
That kind of stuff happens all the time. We've got a lot of people who, there's obviously lots of people who love different genres of music, but because of the nature of who we hire, we have a lot of people who are great at, or community leaders at, something that's not their work. And so if you open your ears to it, there's a lot of other experiences that you can go and experience. And it's not even just music. Bruce, our CFO, is a New Zealand rep surfer. So it's things like that. We hire people who are extreme at something, and then they're also great at their work, and together it makes a great mix.
Interesting. That's really cool. So I'd love to hear more about, what that current state of play looks like. So you sort of mentioned at the top, but to give us a bit of context, what is the scale of the organization? Where are you based? And what is the sort of current life cycle of the product journey that you guys are on?
Right. Okay. So we're about 150 people in New Zealand. That's our HQ. We have a artist relations studio in LA, New York, and London. And we have about 15 staff spread around the world on top of that. The way I describe the life cycle, so in DJ, we are the most used DJ software in the world. And trying not to use buzzwords, but it's what we call the top of the S curve. So DJ is a mature industry now, and we're the most used, and so growth is incremental. And so a few years ago, we kind of went, well, we're number one. How do we keep growing? And so then we thought, well, actually, we need a new adjacent product. And so you kind of follow your customers. And so we thought, well, what do DJs want to do next? And pretty much all DJs want to make music after a few months. So we thought, okay, well, is there a gap there? And so when we looked at the music production software out there, we kind of came to two hypotheses, which was a lot of it's just too hard to use. That they were started 20 years ago before the information age came along, and you really had to learn and read manuals before you could use stuff. And there was nothing that was really sample based. A lot of music these days is made from samples, either sound samples or old records. And there was nothing that let DJs use the analogies and the skills they learned from DJ over. So we kind of thought there was a gap there. So we jumped in and we created a Serato Sample in Studio, which essentially optimizes sample-based music production, where DJs could use the analogies that they learnt DJing and could optimize sample-based music, which is a lot of the top 50 in hip-hop music these days. And so that's our newest growing product.
Cool. Yeah, I suppose that, it makes so much sense to be a complement to what's already been built there. And is that so starting to take flight, and you've got some good people starting to use that in globally? Yeah, so
we're getting more and more A-listers just kind of giving it shout outs without us. It's a really great feeling when there's an A-lister that you didn't talk to that gives your product a shout out online. And more that's happening with music production, so, and it's growing as a product. Although I hate to say it, last year was terrible for a lot of people, but it was great for music production. What does everyone who was stuck at home want to do? They wanted to learn how to make beats and learn how to DJ. So it really grew our numbers last year. It was the boost that product needed. And so now it's on a amazing growth path.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear, and a nice bonus of what has been a pretty challenging year, I imagine, for a lot of people. If you're looking forward, so obviously this new product line has a lot of growth potential in it. Where would you hope to see, say, Serato, if you were to continue on that growth path in 5 years' time? Like, what could the business look like?
Yeah, well, the reason I use the line for DJ, we're the most used DJ software in the world, is that's not, there's no gray in that. There's just only one number one. I'd say we could get there for music production. I'd love to be in a place where we're the most used music production and DJ software in the world. At that point, we might do something like consolidate and become a bit more like Netflix. We don't know, but there's a lot of space to grow in music production right now. And the great thing about it for us as well, as it's software led, you don't need a piece of hardware, so we can really grow worldwide without having to spend too much time on the retail channel. Interesting.
Now, from a people standpoint, you're still continuing to grow really quickly. I'd love to sort of unpack a little bit something you said earlier, which was around Serato being a place for the misfits. Well, not to use that exact term, but you said it being around a collection of, perhaps misfits. What are some of the key traits and characteristics of people that typically do really well at Serato?
Yeah, well, as I said before, we've got, and misfits is actually a term one of our ex-IT guys coined, and I really like it actually because I feel like it describes us. One of the things at work is we have quite a radical range of people, and I know all companies say that, but I feel like we've got a bigger range than most. It's everything from hardcore computer science people to quite successful music producers to artists to highly organized people. And so one of the things is you need to be able to collaborate with a wide range of people. So nothing of real value gets made by a single person. And so when you've got so many misfits or outliers, you need to be able to collaborate with all of them. So that's one of those. And then the next thing is usually you have to be amazing at the one skill. But then on top of that, things change so quickly in technology. I feel like they change quicker and quicker every year. You may need to be willing to adapt quickly. I feel like the ability to adapt is both a defining company skill, but a defining personal skill as well, because every year things change. Technology is pushing that change, and unless you're willing to change with it, i.e. adapt, then unfortunately I feel more and more people get left behind.
Interesting. And then from a culture standpoint, having such a broad mix of misfits and people that make up that organization, how is that all knitted together? I think you've already touched on it a little bit, but what are the ways that those people all come together and really work effectively?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, because we've got a genuinely interesting product and industry, they've already got the desire to. And so a lot of the time, sometimes it's just about the rules of how we do it, or the cultural understanding that we do have outliers and we need to work harder to be able to communicate together. And so I think that it works in the sense that we talk about the fact that we're all different, yet we come together. And so people try, I think, and because we all genuinely believe in what we do, it's not as hard as it may seem. It tends to be quite a cohesive group a lot of the time, because you put your goals, a lot of the time people put their goals ahead of the ego, and that works out well. So even if you disagree with people, it's actually okay, because you have an understanding that you disagree due to trying to do a goal.
Yeah, interesting. And then you sort of think about the technical side of the business and maybe the non-technical side of the business. Is it essential that either or both sides know the music industry or have exposure to the music industry? Or, what are some of the examples of people that might not have traditional experience that have come and done really well at Serato?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that. I mean, I think I said before, I've called them outliers. We tend to hire people who have a lot of experience in a thing, and that usually often means because they're so focused on that thing to date that they don't know about the other parts. And so we hire people straight out of the music industry who know nothing about tech. Often, well, they know about computers and things. And we hire people out of computer science who know very little about the music industry. So you tend not to know about everything. And it's actually it's very rare to find someone who is an expert on both sides. So you tend to need to be very good at something to get in the door. But then after that, it's your ability to adapt and its ability to learn. It's a very specialized and niche industry and company. And often the people who do well come in, they listen, they find their niche, and they just kind of follow into that. Yeah. And more and more, a company, the way we view it, is more like an organism than a set of rules or a big tower. And so you follow it as it grows. And that works well for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of sort of thinking about it, in a really sort of modern take on how things should be thought about, I think. And then for you personally, Young, like if you think about why now is such a great time to be a part of the business, what is that for you personally?
I mean, I don't know about now. I think any time would have been a great time. I think I said before, I mean, no disrespect to my old employers, but everything before now, a lot of it felt like a job. Whereas I got to a place where I am proud of what we build. I genuinely like the people I work with. We represent New Zealand a lot globally, and we've got a really good path to continue growing. And so, I'm pretty happy with where we are, and I feel like as we grow, we could be a world power of music in New Zealand, and that would be great for us and New Zealand and the music industry.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then I suppose in terms of career advice, so, this can be a bit more broad. It doesn't necessarily have to be the younger version of yourself. It might be, people working in a corporate job that are not necessarily loving it and it feels like a job, or it could be people thinking about New Zealand from overseas. have you got any? You've already touched upon your own career advice a little bit, but is there any career advice that you can share to others when they're sort of thinking about their next steps that might have been helpful for you in the past?
Yeah, I think with tech's there's always been a shortage in tech from as long as I've known. So I feel like if you really focus on your work and make a name for yourself, opportunities can find you. I'd mix that with, often I feel like when I look around the people who have done well, one of the other defining attributes is that they are quite risk friendly. Sometimes I think people overthink whether they should take a step in terms of a job or in terms of everything. And I feel like if it's a step that you would genuinely enjoy and you may or may not know whether you can do it, just jump at it. I feel like in tech, you can always find another job. The industry is buoyant, and even if you lost a year at a job you didn't like, you can just change and go to another job. So I'd go, do the best at your current job and look for opportunities. And if something feels right, you should jump at it.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think that advice as well of not overthinking it is a really good one, and it seems to have served you very well over the years. Kind of following your gut and just figuring out as you have gone along has led you to somewhere, which sounds like you're not leaving anytime soon.
Yeah, and it's especially true in tech, right? Because when you're pushing tech, no one's done it and it's new ground, so no one can really give you that solid advice. And it keeps growing. So yeah, jump at every opportunity, I'd say.
Yeah, a great time to be a part of it. Outstanding. Well, Young, it's been an absolute pleasure to sort of unpick your career journey as well as learn a bit more about Serato. It's a really impressive business that, from a personal standpoint, I very much admire, and excited to see how things continue to grow. So I appreciate you taking some time to chat.
Great. Thanks for having me.